Okay, here's a verse for the year, and you're familiar with it. Isaiah chapter 60, verse 1. Arise and shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has shone upon you. Arise and shine. This is our opportunity to shine. We want to be better equipped than ever before. And I think in the room, I just want to say publicly how much I appreciate the passion and the information and the sharing of both Lee and Boyd last night. I feel my light is brighter than it was when I got here. And, I used to have a car, I still do. I have a car that you know how the front headlight tends to cloud up? And, after a while, you don't think the headlights are very clear. They're on, but they're not very clear. So you can get this polish, and you can polish it, and it looks like they're brand new. And that's what I feel like when we come together like this. It's like the Lord just clearing off some of the stuff that has made my light not quite as bright. And so I'm going to be a better husband. Joy? Good. That's an answer to prayer. I'm going to be a better father. I'm going to be a better pastor, a better friend, because my light's a little brighter as a result of what we heard last night and the information we received this morning. And it's going to be great. Let's welcome back Lee McLeod.
We hope you enjoyed that last session. And here's the second session. We actually have 3 this morning. Here will be the second session having to do with enriching. So a few months ago, I was thinking, Brian and I were having a conversation. By the way, Brian, you weren't here last night, but I commented, and I think you would agree, on how great it is to work on a great team. And we have one at the network. And he's another one of our network team members. We do have some brand new people in the room. So when you come up, I would like you to just give a snapshot of your responsibilities on our team. But Brian and I were talking about this, and often he and Barb are out doing other things and not available, and because we have so much ministry going on. But we discovered that he was actually going to be available for today. And I said, Brian, nobody travels our state like you do in the sense of connecting with young millennial leaders. Nobody hears a millennial's perspective of what I wish my lead pastor would do as much. And maybe no one hears lead pastors say, well, I wish I could get this from my millennials as much as he does. So I said, Brian, let's put something together, and I want you to take this session and share. And I want you to share from this perspective. How do we empower millennials? How do we maximize that group of people? And he will define millennials if that's an unfamiliar term to you. But I want you to welcome Brian Eno as he comes and talks about that.
Good morning. I just want to thank Pastor Lee right up front for giving me the opportunity to share. My wife and I weren't with you last night, but Barbara's here, so just put your hand up there real quick. Our son's a senior in high school. Hard to believe that. When we came on the team, he was 8 years old, so it's hard to believe that he's going to graduate here really soon and move away, and or maybe move away, but not right away. My wife's like, no, but. He plays basketball. He's played for all 4 years, so he's starting on the varsity team, and we just wanted to make his game last night. It was a local game, and we don't always get to go to all of them, so that's why we were missing last night. We wish we could have been, but we had to make sure our priorities were right in order for this situation. I think you understand. But we're glad to be with you here today. We'll be here the rest of the day through lunch. If you want to connect with me one-on-one, I'd love to do that. But thank you, Pastor Lee, because I really feel like those who are in this room here are some of the most valuable individuals, leaders in our whole network. The majority of our churches, probably 130 or more, are under 150 people. So you are the majority, and you have the huge influence in our state. So thank you for what you do, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to share. Just a second, my notes are messed up here, but anyways, we'll get them right in order here. Sorry about that. Yeah, at least I knew. Okay. I'm like looking down and going, this isn't in the right order. But anyways, we'll get into that in just a moment. But, I want to show you a video to start us out with. And, I think sometimes I want to talk to you about empowering millennial leaders. And I think sometimes we have, especially the older generation, has some stereotypes about millennials, that generation, that aren't always accurate. And so I think this video kind of describes what I want to talk about. So if you just turn your attention, and if we could just roll that video, that'd be great.
I was at church one day, and the speaker that day was different. I just sat there with tears in my eyes, learning about this ministry that was revolutionizing the planet. I'm talking, of course, about Millennial International. The need is enormous. There are over 10 million millennials out there who have graduated with no work ethic, no job, no discernible skills at all, and they have expenses. Housing.
Student loans.
Credit card debt.
And I didn't really realize the magnitude of the problem until I looked into the eyes of a millennial. And I saw that face with the dead, nothing's happening up here kind of thing. So I went out to the booth after the service, and I talked with the guy, and he really informed me about the devastation that's not being able to fund a millennial lifestyle.
Core Power Yoga.
Birchbox for men.
I looked over all the envelopes, and my heart was really touched when I saw this one particular fellow that I just had to get more information about him. He was Declan from Beverly Hills.
I am an aspiring photographer. I graduated college with an art degree, so obviously that puts me at a disadvantage.
Volkswagen Jetta lease.
Beard wax.
Spotify Premium.
In his last letter, he wrote to me and said that his weekend was, how do you put it, totes lit fam. Literally have no idea what that means.
Ben Cycle membership.
Pet food for my rescue dog. Uber's home from a pub crawl.
A typical sponsorship program costs $29 a month. Millennial International is actually $2,900 a month. Yeah, it seems expensive at first, but when you see the need, it is so worth it.
Trunk Club subscription.
Essential oils. Annual pilgrimage to Bethel Church.
It's the same as a traditional sponsorship program, except instead of getting, say, a soccer ball for his birthday, he's getting an Audi.
Am I capable of having a job? Sure, but I just feel like maybe employment right now would just kind of be stifling my creativity.
Through the sponsorship program, they actually set up a chance for us to meet each other in person. I brought him an apple pie that my wife had baked for him, but I totally forgot he's gluten-free, so we couldn't eat it.
I mean, obviously, I've seen Food Inc., so I don't eat the traditional meals like everybody else. For breakfast, I usually do like some kombucha juice.
He really didn't have much energy that week, and it turns out he was on a juice cleanse. And I wanted to respect that. My wish for Declan, that he would realize his potential in life, that he would be better, achieve more.
I've been getting blue ribbons and participation trophies my whole life. What do you expect? For me, if it wasn't for the program, I'd have to get a job. Or worse, start a GoFundMe.
Many of these kids in traditional sponsorship programs are fighting diseases like malaria, pneumonia, tuberculosis. And these millennials have the same struggle. Peanut allergies, pollen sensitivity, lactose intolerance. Kids in Africa are getting typhoid. Declan was recently diagnosed with tennis elbow. I was originally paying vision and eye care insurance for him, but it turns out his eyeglasses weren't even real. To me, you can't put a price on friendship. Join me in sponsoring a millennial today and help us.
Help us.
Help us. Help us live the lives we portray on Instagram.
Oh, that's kind of funny, though. I don't know if I agree with everything, but I think it's kind of funny. You know, my wife and I have worked, I was thinking about this one day, we worked with teenagers, youth, and children for really our entire adult life. We started out right as adults working with them. And, spent 13 years in San Diego, and then 9 years in Central Oregon, and then really for the past 9 years we've worked at the Oregon Ministry Network. and Pastor Lee asked me to kind of tell you what we do. We work with youth leaders, children's leaders, rural rangers, girls ministries, anyone who works with the next generation, meaning 18 and under in your church. We try to work with their leaders to provide resources to fulfill the mission that he shared, to help develop effective leaders. We want them to be effective and then build healthy ministries. And so if it's at the local level or if it's a ministry that we lead at the state level, if it be kids convention or youth convention or camps or whatever. So that's what we do. And, one day I had someone ask me, well, tell me about the next generation. And I knew they were referring to not the millennials, but they were referring to the children in their children's church, the youth in their youth church, what some have referred to as Generation Z. And but I began to think, yeah, I work with them, but really for the last 9 years, I work with millennial leaders. I work with the leaders that are leading them. And I understand, I think, that culture a little bit more even than the younger generation, other than what I volunteer my local church to do. So, when in each one of those different stages that I was involved in, the Lord gave me a life verse. And hopefully the Lord gives you different life verses in your life that you can hold on to. And it seems like when I was in San Diego, I had one verse that was just kind of my lifeline. Then I moved to Central Oregon. The Lord gave me a different one. And when I came to this role, He gave me Psalm 78. And I'd like to read it to you. I think it'll be on the screen today. And this is kind of my life verse for the last 9 years. It says, "O my people, listen to my instructions. Open your ears to what I am saying, for I will speak to you in a parable. I will teach you hidden lessons from our past, stories we've heard and known, stories our ancestors handed down to us. We will not hide these truths from our children. We will tell the next generation about the glorious deeds of the Lord, about His power and His mighty wonders. For He issued His laws to Jacob. He gave instructions to Israel. He commanded our ancestors to teach them to their children so the next generation might know them, even the children not yet born, and that they in turn would teach their own children. So each generation should set its hope anew on God, not forgetting His glorious miracles and obeying His commands." This is the way I see this verse, this is a command to empower the next generation. To empower the next generation to take and lead His church. Many adults today, like I said, have kind of a negative view, if you can, or a stereotypical view that we saw in the video there of millennials. And I don't think it gives us the full story of that generation that I get to work with on a regular basis. When I see the next generation, that millennial generation that we want to talk about today, when I see them, I don't fear about the future of the church. I feel like the church is going to be in good hands, is in good hands, and the future's going to be just fine. I see a generation of students that are full of passion, and young leaders, let me say it that way, that are full of passion, they're full of compassion, and they're hungry to serve. But they're not the same generation that you and I may be a part of. And I want us to talk about that. But I have no doubt that God's church is going to be just fine. Our responsibility as church leaders, I believe, is to pass the mantle of leadership on to the next generation, just like someone passed it to you and me. I brought a baton with me today. If you're at all involved in track or understand track or relay races, the coach will tell you in a relay race the race is won in the handing off the baton. It's won in that moment. How well you can exchange the baton wins or loses the race. And I don't think it's anything different in God's church today. If we're going to continue to have a church, and God's going to continue to have a church that's strong, and the next leadership can take it on from this leadership, we have to be able to exchange it in an effective way and not drop the baton, if you would. That's so important. And I think to better understand the next generation, this millennial generation that I want to talk with you a little bit about today, those millennials that are in your church, maybe they're volunteering as a youth leader or as a children's leader, or they're on the board or some other role, I think it's good to contrast that with the other generations that are living. Today we have 5 generations living on the planet. Most scholars would tell us that they would break it down into 5 generations. The reality is that's never happened in modern history as it is today. Hayden Shaw, in his book Generational IQ, I put it up here, labels those 5 generations this way. I think it will be on the screen. He labels it the traditionalists, or what maybe you have heard the term the builder generation, 72 and above, the baby boomers, ages 53 to 71, the Generation X, 37 to 52, which is my generation, the one that I would be in, the millennials, the ones that generation we want to kind of talk about today, 16 to 36. Those young leaders, up and coming or already have a role. Many of you in this room are millennials, and it's kind of intimidating to talk about your generation. Please tell me if I got it wrong after we're all done, but not during the thing, okay? And then Generation Z. Generation Z, not everyone even has named the next generation after millennials. That's kind of the one that seems to be sticking the most right now, and that's those who are 15 and under. Again, those who are in your children's church, those who are in your youth group right now or coming into it. Another way to look at these generations is you might look at them this way. The iPhone generation, the telephone generation, the two-way radio generation, the telegram generation, and the Pony Express generation. So the question is, which one best describes you? You can kind of think about that for a second. Which one do I fit into in this room? My guess is many of us fit in a lot of different ones up there. As I noted, Generational IQ, we actually have a book that we're going to give every one of you before you leave of Generational IQ. Because we want you to understand these different generations. It's actually going to be a free gift for every registered couple, one per registered couple, just because we want to make sure everybody gets one. Inside that book also, we have taken and something that Pastor Boyd put together some time ago and took and compiled a real short overview of each of the generations, at least the first four. And so we have taken that 1.5 sheet paper and put it inside the book, so it's in there for you to help you understand all of the generations, because you may be working with a different generation or have questions about that. How do I work with them? How do I lead them? How do I empower them? But this morning we're going to talk about the millennial generation, the millennials. So to help us with our main topic today, I want us to talk about this idea of millennial generations and help you to understand a few things about them. So the first thing is this. In comparison to the previous generations, the other three that I mentioned, the millennials' journey seems to start sooner and end later. And what do I mean by that? Puberty seems to start earlier. Exposure to life's experiences and all the things that life has to offer seems to start earlier. Stress seems to start earlier in our teens' lives today. And at the same time, maturity seems to come later. Many have referred to this as prolonged adolescence. That it seems like that period of growing up from a teenager to an adult seems to take longer. And I don't think that we're making a mistake when we look at it and say it does seem like it's taking longer. Millennials are getting married later. Today, the average age of marriage for a woman is 27 and for a man is 29. That's 5 years later than it was 50 years ago. So they are getting married later. Millennials are getting married later. They're having children later. The average age for a woman bearing children is 26 years old. That's 5 years later than it was in 1970. So statistics don't lie. That's just reality. They're waiting for these things that used to be, we consider benchmarks to adulthood. They're taking longer to get to those benchmarks. So it seems like they're almost living in slow motion, if you would, of how long it's taking them to get there. Millennials are starting their careers later. Whereas it used to be many would graduate high school and immediately get into the workplace, get their career going and all that. Right out of high school today, millennials wait until maybe their late 20s or early 30s until they get a lifelong career going. Some of that has to do with the fact that they're the most formally educated generation in history. Many of them are having 4 to 6, even 8 years of higher education. And so they're waiting until they're done with their education to start that career. It's just the way it is. It's just reality. And then one more thing is this. Financial independence seems to come later for millennials. This is partly due to education, because they're putting that off to start their careers. Part of it has to do with the economy. 40% of millennials will move back home while they're in their 20s. 40%. And this isn't necessarily a mark of immaturity like sometimes the video might even depict. Sometimes it's a strategic, intentional move that they've made with their parents to help them get financial independence. So it's not like, oh, they're lazy or whatever. It's just the culture's changing. And that's the millennials that we're talking about today. The second thing I want to share with you is some positives about millennials that I've observed and I've gleaned from a guy named Dr. Tim Elmore, and some of you might have heard of him before. But he says they're confident. I thought this was interesting. 86% of high school students believe the next Bill Gates is in their generation. And then 51% of them, of these high school students, believe the next Bill Gates, that they know who that is, that they personally know the next Bill Gates. And 24% of those high school students believe they are the next Bill Gates. That's confident. No matter if they're the next Bill Gates or not, they're confident. They don't lack in confidence necessarily. They think outside the box. And these are positives. They understand there's more than one way to accomplish a goal. And they ask the question, why do we have to do it that way? What about these other ways? So they think outside the box. They're technology savvy. Matter of fact, many would say that millennials view technology, like for instance Wi-Fi, or they'd be able to connect to the internet, at the same level of value as air and water. It's a necessity. What do you mean there's no Wi-Fi? What do you mean I can't get online? What do you mean I can't look at my Facebook or whatever? It's just a necessity in life like water and air to them. Community-oriented. That's a positive. They're community-oriented. They value relationships like families and friends and teams. This is an important value to them. That's a good thing. And they're entrepreneurial. They're creative. And they're purposeful. This is a good generation that God's raising up with great highlights and great positive things about them. Let me share a few not so positives that maybe we tend to notice about this millennial generation that we should understand. First, they tend to be overexposed to information and underexposed to real life experience. And so what can happen is they can come across as being sometimes a little cocky. They've watched 16 YouTube videos on how this thing's done and they think they're the expert, but they haven't actually done it. And so that's something that we got to work through sometimes with the millennials. But they value experience, and we'll get into that in a moment. They just haven't had enough life experience because they haven't lived long enough. It's just the way reality is. YouTube's a great thing. I think of my own son who's right at the bottom of that millennial age. He learned to play the guitar mainly through YouTube. I mean, so it's a great tool, but sometimes it can give you that idea that you're cocky. The second one is they can be oversensitive and non-risk takers. Because some have referred to them as the tolerant generation. This is society has taught them this idea of tolerance and making sure there's safe places for everyone. Did you know that 20 years ago there was a movement in America to remove all the monkey bars and the jungle gyms from our playgrounds? Because they had to be safe. We had to make our playgrounds safe zones. Someone might break their arm on that monkey bar. They might fall off that jungle gym. Yet it was those same obstacles that helped kids develop motor skills needed for adult life. So the things they needed for adult life, we took away from them and said, no, that's not safe. Don't play with that. And so that now we have a generation that can tend to be, that way, a little less risk-taking. Skills that help them navigate like a job interview or marriage, starting a business, were things that we've kind of taken away from them at times. And this has created that generation that avoids risk or maybe is fearful of different things, fearful of failure specifically. And here's one more not so positive maybe is they may have an entitlement worldview. And I know some of you are saying, may? What are you talking about? But I want you to think of their worldview in light of how they've grown up, this generation. If you grow up in a world of speed, you may assume that slow is bad. Think about that. If you grow up in a world of convenience, you may assume that hard is bad. If you grow up in a world of entitlement, you may assume that unexciting is bad. Or entertainment, excuse me. If you grow up in a world of entertainment, you may assume that unexciting is bad. If you grow up in a world of nurture, you may assume that risk is bad. And if you grow up in a world of entitlement, you may assume that labor is bad. So some of it's just the fact of what they grew up in, and I guess we can blame the generations before them for that, huh? Because that's the world we've created for them. Many times, it's the slow, it's the hard, it's the unexciting, it's the risk-taking and the laborious things that develop our character. And we can't shelter people from that all the time. So here's the final thing I want to tell you about, that I want you to understand about this generation, and that is that they're an epic generation. They're an epic generation. Dr. Leonard Sweet, I think, is famous for coining that phrase when it comes to the millennials, that being an epic generation. And I want to use that phrase to give you 4 fundamental characteristics that I think will help you in understanding millennials. And then at the same time, I want to give you 4 shifts that we should consider making to better lead and empower millennial leaders in your church, those younger leaders in your church. The first one is experiential. Experiential is the E. I have learned and observed that millennials are more into the style of life than the stuff of life. They are less materialistic than their parents and previous generations may be. Harris Poll did a poll, and they discovered that 78% of millennials would rather pay for an experience than purchase material things. They want to have an experience in life. They're not looking for an expert here up on the stage like maybe you might perceive that I am today. That's not really what they're looking for, is an expert with another teaching. They're really looking for a guide to walk beside them in life and mentor them. That's what they're looking for more than anything else. We will need to intentionally create leadership mentoring where we connect the older generation with the younger generation if you really want to lead and empower the millennial leaders in your room, in your church. I think of Pastor Bill. He's a great example, and I was going to say this regardless if he's here or not. I told him this the other day. But I think what he's done with our Young Leaders Initiative is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Is he's provided an experience for our young leaders, those who are under 40, and said, you know what, we're going to provide an experience. We're going to put you alongside and mentor you along older generation. You're going to come along and you're going to sit in the presbytery. You're going to be with an older generation. You're going to go on a missions trip with Pastor Boyd and spend a week or 10 days overseas. It's all about the experience. It wasn't about a lecture. We don't get up there and lecture the 40 and under and say this is what you need to know. It's all about walking beside them in life. And he's done that for 10 years, and we got over 100 of these leaders, which represents about 20% of our credentialed ministers that have had this experience, that are under 40. Many of you sitting in this room. And it was huge. So here's the shift I think we need to make. Because they're experiential in nature, we will need to shift from just being a manager to being a mentor. The idea to lead millennials that I'm going to manage what you do. Here's your responsibilities, or here's your tasks, and I'll check in on you every once in a while and manage that. That's not how you're going to best empower and lead this millennial generation. It's going to have to move into more of a mentor, walk beside type leadership. Because that's what they're needing, that's what they're desiring. The P in EPIC is participatory. Millennials have been conditioned to participate in the outcome of things all their life. They've had the question, what do you want to eat after church on Sunday? Where do you want to go on vacation? They even get to choose who stays on the reality TV show for another week. Right? I'm a Generation Xer. My parents were traditionalists. I never was asked where I wanted to eat. I was never asked where I wanted to go on vacation. It was considered lucky to get to eat and enjoy their vacation. Right? Think about it. But that's not the millennial generation. I think of my own son after church. Where do you want to eat, son? What do you want to do? Where do you want to go on your graduation for high school? Some of you might have saw on Facebook, we were at Lambeau Field for a Packer game at Christmas time. That was because that's what he wanted for his high school trip. We asked him. My parents never asked me that. It's a different generation. They're involved. They're participatory. And millennials support what they help create. They support what they help create. To empower younger leaders, we have to give them ownership. That's what they're used to. That's where they live. That's their culture. Millennials desire to participate in things that they believe in and are full of purpose. So here's the shift I think we need to make in leadership. Because they're participatory, we need to shift from offering a position to offering a purpose. Position to a purpose. They're not interested necessarily in titles. They're not even necessarily interested in the paycheck, believe it or not. They're interested in purpose. I think of a young lady that's helped us on our team for our PK escape. Her name's Amanda. Amanda grew up as a pastor's kid. When she went to our PK escapes as a high school kid. When we began to develop it, she said she wanted to be on the team. She spent hours recruiting, training, getting all the cabin leaders ready for our PK escape that was supposed to happen a couple weeks ago. Literally hours of time. Only to find out the week before that we ended up canceling it because of the ice storm. You know what she said after it was all said and done? I'm feeling bad and guilty because she spent all this hour. She says, it's okay. I'd love to serve again next year if you'd have me. If you'd have me. Why? Because she saw purpose behind what she was doing. She'd experienced it as a child. She saw how valuable it was, and she was giving, not because she was going to get some paycheck, because she wasn't, or even recognition, but simply she was giving because she saw the purpose behind it. And if you'll have me, I'll do it again. I think with the next generation, with this millennial generation, we have to be able to start with the question why. Because they're asking why. Why would I want to do that? Why would I want to help with that? Why should I serve in that? Simon Sinek wrote a great book called Start With Why. So true. Give them purpose. The I is informational. They grow up in a world filled with information. I grew up, again, as an Xer with one screen. One TV screen, and I wasn't allowed to change the channel. Reality. This millennial generation has grown up with 3 or more screens. They got on-demand TV, they got Google on their laptop and Siri on their phone. They can watch all of them at the same time. It's insane. They have information overload almost. They're the most formally education generation ever in history, as I said earlier, if you think about it. And with more education and more information comes more questions. Let me say that again. With more information and more education comes more questions and also more doubt. Well, we better be prepared to answer the questions. We better be prepared with our teachings and our sermons on Sunday. We better make sure our facts are accurate, and we better be prepared to be fact-checked. Because they're sitting there with a little phone right here, and they can look up on Google anything that you say and see if it's right. As a matter of fact, that happened to me not too long ago. I was at the coast with about 15 youth pastors, and I was talking about the value of the Assemblies of God and sharing how great it is to be a part of such a worldwide movement. And I made this statement. I said, did you know that there's 10 times more Assembly of God churches in the world than there are McDonald's? And I had some faces like I see right now, like, really? Later, one of the leaders came to me and said, I didn't really believe that. I Googled it, and you know what? You were right. That's happening every Sunday, I'm guessing, in most of your churches. You make a statement, and you're Google. I've probably been fact-checked already today. So it's just the reality. And so I think we have to embrace technology. We have to embrace it. The day of coming into church and having the sign on the screen that says, please silence your cell phone or turn it off or put it away, is probably gone. Because you need to realize when a millennial walks into your church, and maybe others who aren't even millennials, and they bring this in, they're not only bringing their phone in, they're bringing their notebook in because they're using Evernote. They're bringing in their Bible because they're using YouVersion. They're bringing in their camera because they're taking a picture of a cool slide that I see them do regularly to Pastor Kevin, who I know is in the room, in our church, because they want to capture it and put it on Instagram when they go home. So to tell them to put that away, you're telling them to put away all those tools. It's not a toy, it's a tool to them. And so one way that I've tried to deal with this is when I start out a sermon, if I'm preaching in your church on Sunday morning, I'll say something like this. Please turn your Bible to or turn your Bible onto. By just simply saying you can turn your Bible onto, you're giving them permission and you're saying, I'm embracing technology, which is so important to them. So here's the shift. Shift number 3 is this. Because they're exposed to so much information, we need a shift from giving out tasks to giving out responsibilities. They desire to be change agents for the future, not caregivers of the past. Remember, they see that there's more than one way to do it. They desire so we must encourage them and allow them to be owners and not just renters of the ministry that we're asking them to lead. And we all know the difference. A renter, if they're working in the nursery, they forgot something in the nursery, they walk back in, the place is a mess, they go grab what they have and what they left behind and they leave. But the owner walks into that same room and they begin to clean it up. Begin to put it back because this is my ministry. This represents me. And I think we have to shift to not giving away tasks. This is what I need you to do, but responsibilities and letting them have ownership of what we're asking them and empowering them to lead. And the last one is C is community. They love being connected. FOMO is a real thing. Fear of missing out. They don't want to miss out on something. Community will always trump programs for a millennial because that's what they value. You know, I got a book up here called Growing Younger by Fuller Institute. They did a 3 years of research on this idea of how do we minister and reach the younger generation, the millennials and below. And one of the things they said is millennials are looking for connection from their church, desiring a community that is like a family. A community that's like a family. So we need to look for opportunities to provide them with that community when they can serve in. So here's the 4th shift. Because they highly value community, we need to shift from being a staff to being a team. Or maybe even a family. Millennials are long for community, and being on a team is normal to them. That's what they're used to. In school, they were in study groups. In work, they work in teams. They interview for jobs in teams. It's crazy. That's just what they're used to. That's their culture. So if we want to best empower them leader, we need to begin to work within that culture. You know, I think of our kids convention team that helps us lead our kids convention. All millennials except for me and one other person. And they just so love to come together and work on something together that's going to make a big impact. But part of it's just that team, and they told me that. I want to share with you before we finish up here this concept of something that I think will help us. Because we're talking about how do we empower millennial leaders. And I want you to hear a phrase that I got out of the book Growing Young called key chain leader. I think this is a key if you want to work with the next generation and help empower that next generation of millennials, is we have to become key chain leaders. Do you remember your first set of keys? Do you remember the first set of keys? My first set of keys came to me, I think when I was about 16 years old. They came in the form of a key that started a 1972 Pontiac Le Mans. That was my first car. 1972 Pontiac Le Mans. This thing had a 454 under the hood, Pastor. You'd appreciate that. A lot of power in that car. Boy, did I feel powerful. The only negative about that car is it was completely infested with cockroaches. True story. I mean, I think the guy I bought it from earlier lived in it. And I tried to bomb it twice. I couldn't get them out. I had to drive with the dome light on at night just to keep the cockroaches from coming out. But boy, did I feel powerful behind that car. Yeah. Hard to take a date out on it, Pastor Lee. Why is the dome light on? Keys represent, think of this. Keys represent power, access, and authority. Keys represent power, access, and authority. And the more you have, the more keys you have, the more power you have. The more you possess. Tara Powell in the book says this. This is how she describes a key chain leader. She says, keychain leaders are always aware of the keys they hold and intentionally entrust young leaders with their own set of keys at the right time. I began to think about that. I began to think about how I'm a product of a keychain pastor, a keychain church, a keychain youth pastor, a keychain board. You know, at the age 18, I was given my first key in the church, and it came in the form of leading a small group. At 19, I was given another key when I became the high school Sunday school teacher. At 20, the Assemblies of God, can you believe this? At 20 years old, the Assemblies of God gave me the key in the form of credentialed minister. I was only 20 years old, I look back. At 21, the next key came when I became the part-time junior high pastor. At 22, I became a deacon member on the deacon board of our church. That was another key. And at 23, I was given the key of full-time youth pastor. So in 6 years, I was given 6 keys. Think of that. Not bad for someone who didn't even grow up in church and didn't get saved until he was 17. Why? Because I had a church that understood the principle of key chain leader. That if we're going to empower the next generation, we have to be okay to give the keys away, to give some authority away, to give some influence away. The idea of key chain leadership isn't anything new. Jesus modeled key chain leadership with his own disciples. Do a study of it. That's how he led. He slowly gave the keys of authority away to his followers. So that 3 years later, when he died and rose again and said, I'm going to heaven, they were ready. Think about it. If you're willing, this is what I've learned. If you're willing to entrust the keys to younger leaders, they will give you their time. They will give you their energy. They'll give you their talent. They'll give you their very lives. If you're willing to give them away. There's a young lady in the room, I think she's in the room, named Jen Lasota, a great example. She started a ministry in our network that was vital called 8410. We have all the events we do, some of them really require heavy volunteers. And so about 7 years ago, she started this ministry where we recruited volunteers just to come and serve at our events. To help set up, they weren't skilled positions, just set up, tear down, fill in gaps where things were. After doing that for 4 years, I remember she came to me and she did a great job. She came to me and she said, I got to step down, but I have someone in mind I'd like to train. I didn't expect that second statement. You always expect that someone's going to eventually age out and we all have expiration dates, you know what I mean? And so you had that idea, but when she said, I have someone else in mind I'd like to raise up, and then she gave the next year to walk beside them, a young lady named Rosa, who's done it now for 2 years, and took it to a whole nother level. Wrote a whole booklet on how it works, and, uses Google Documents, and it's just crazy what she's done. She's given her time, she's given her talent, she's given her very life. And she simply gave her the key. And said, go for it. I'm going to skip through the next couple slides because I think we're going to run out of time otherwise. But let's jump to the slide where it says becoming a key chain leader. I want to talk to you real quick because you may be sitting here, Brian, that's great. You've given me all kinds of information. But you still haven't really answered the question, how do I empower the next generation? How do I empower millennials? I want to give you 4 steps before we run out of time. 4 steps that I think you can take to empower millennial leaders. And I think the bottom line is this. If you want to empower millennial leaders, you need to become a key chain leader. You have to be willing to give the keys away. There's different types of key chain leaders it talks about in here. It talks about those who are keyless leaders. They don't have any keys yet. They're trying to figure out what they got. Maybe they're new. There's key hoarding leaders. Those who never want to give the keys away. Maybe you know someone like that. That no one can do it as good as them. There's key loaner leaders. Those who will take the key off, give it, but they expect it back right away. And then there's the key chain leader who's willing to give it away. And I think that's what you need to become. So here's some things you can do to improve in this area of your life. If you're working with millennials, those younger leaders, and you're trying to figure out how do I help them fulfill what God's called them to do, and how do I let them and partner with them in ministry. So here's some things. Number one is evaluate your own keychain. Evaluate your own keychain. Before you can entrust others with your leadership keys, you first must be aware of what keys you do and don't possess. Some of us aren't even sure what keys we have on our chain. So you need to evaluate the ones you have. You can't give away power, access, and authority that you don't already have. You can't do that. So once you discover what keys you have, then you must consider whether it's possible for you to give away and train up a new young leader to give that key away to them. But it starts with you saying, what keys do I have? And let me also say one other thing. There are certain keys we can never give away as leaders. I think one of those is just a common one is you can't give away vision. If you're the key leader, you got to have the vision. But there's other ones too. So you have to evaluate what you have and what ones you can give and what leaders are in your church that you could train up and give those keys away to. Here's the second step. Intentionally spend time with your millennial leaders. And really, before you can even take that step, you might have to do something else. And that's evaluate your own schedule. Because some of us are like, we're so busy, I don't have any time to intentionally spend time with millennial leaders. Well, then you need to make time. And that means that you need to look at your schedule and say, what am I doing with my time? And then begin to budget your time. Or as Coach Joy would say, create an ideal week, right? And say, if I could plan my week any way that I wanted, what would it look like? That's your ideal week. And make sure part of that, if you're really serious about empowering millennial leaders, that there's time intentionally in there to spend time with them. Because remember, that's what they need. They want someone to walk beside them. They want community. That's important. So intentionally make time to spend listening and learning from millennials. You know, we have to listen and learn from them. It's easiest to entrust keys with someone when you trust them. And the way you trust them is by building a relationship with them and hearing their heart. Intentionally make time to appropriately hand off those keys. Here's the step 3. The third thing I think you can do is train your leaders before giving the keys away. I talked to you about my first set of keys. Even though I got that first set of keys before I could drive it, I had to be trained. I had to go to driver's ed. Back in that day, it was part of school, 6 months of driver's ed, half the school, first semester. I had to pass tests. I had to spend so many hours behind the wheel. They didn't just give me the keys and say, go. I had to be trained. It's no different in ministry. You have to train those you're going to give the keys to. And I think you can follow Jesus' example here. Because Jesus had a great mentoring model. And here it is, real quick. What did Jesus do with his disciples? He said, come and follow me. He said, you're going to be with me. First thing he did is he said, I'm going to do it and you're going to watch. And then somewhere in time, maybe a year into it, he shifted a little bit and he says, I'm going to do and you're going to help. Fed the 5,000 and said, you're going to give out the food. Remember that? Fed the 4,000, go give out the food and get all the scraps back. They were part of the miracles, part of the ministry. But then there was a shift, maybe a year and a half to 2 years into it, where he sends out the 70 2 by 2. And he shifts from I do and you help to you do and I help. And then when he ascended to heaven, what did he say? Go into all the world, preach the gospel. And I will be with you always. You do and I support. My whole point is this. Give the keys away gradually as they build trust, as you mentor, as you lead, but give the keys away. Give them away. I'm a product because someone gave the keys away, and I can pretty much guarantee that every one of us in this room are a product because someone gave the keys to you. Someone said, here's the ministry key. Don't drop it. They passed it on to you and I. And here's the fourth and final step. Learn to say thank you. So where does that fit? It's so important, especially to millennials. Learn to say thank you. I think it's important to all of us. Leadership guru Max Dupree teaches that the first job of a leader is to define reality. I tried to do that a little bit today, to define the reality of the culture of the young leader that we're trying to mentor, empower, and hope that will be on our team. But Max goes on and says, the last job of a leader is to say thank you. The last job of a leader is to say thank you. Gratitude recognizes and affirms the contributions of other leaders. Millennial leaders must know they are appreciated and valued. And if you appreciate them and you value them, they'll give you their heart. They'll give you their soul. They'll give you everything. So we need to learn to say thank you. And not just to millennials. I think that applies to everyone. You learn to say thank you. I want to finish with a quote that's up here, not those questions, but there's a quote right before that. It's a quote by a gentleman by the name of George MacDonald. He actually said this 150 years ago. And I want to read it to you. He said, "The Lord hath not forsaken His people, because the young ones do not think just as the old ones choose. The Lord has something fresh to tell them, and He's getting ready to receive it, and He's getting them ready to receive His message. When we are out of sympathy with the young, then I think our work in this world is over." Pastors, leaders, may we never run out of sympathy for the young. May we understand and remember back to the day that someone handed you the baton of ministry. I look back and I go, who was the idiot that gave it to me at that young age? You know what I'm talking about? I think that sometimes. But then I thank God that they did. You need to be willing to pass the baton to the next generation. God's relying on it. God's expecting this generation to make sure the next generation is ready to lead His church. And I'm telling you, I feel like this millennial generation is going to do just fine once we pass it on.